Hi guys, just a quick apology. In the near-death experience video, unfortunately, one of the cameras, Rachel's camera in particular, wasn't working, so we weren't able to do the three shots of us talking. So that's why I'm looking this way and that way, etc., etc. But apologies, and we'll try and make sure it doesn't happen again. Thank you. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the podcast. We are the Cosmic Commentators, and we're here to take a look at all aspects of spirituality, metaphysics, and religion.
Hello, my name is Rachel, and I'm joined by the wonderful Alex. So it's wonderful to welcome you here. So feel free to join us as we explore the vast subject of life beyond the veil.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Alex.
So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, we have mentioned it quite a few times, and I think today needs to be the day where we talk about it in a lot more detail, and that is near-death experiences.
Oh, that's my favourite subject
I
ever.
thought you might like that one. I thought you might like that one. And there's loads of stuff out there. I mean, just YouTube is inundated. So during the week, I was obviously, we're always reviewing this and discussing this, but during the week, just having a look, and they are thousands and thousands, aren't there, of people putting up different stories around their NDE. And for me, I started to question a lot. And I suppose I do believe in NDEs, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I don't believe they happen. I absolutely do. But I think I really started to question the vast majority of the stories that's put up, and questioning whether there is truth to it. And I suppose that kind of led me into kind of talk about and research some more of a scientific element around NDEs. Yeah. And we'll come to Dr. Bruce Greyson in a little bit. But that was my first, I suppose, overview around NDEs and where we're at this moment in time. What about you?
For me, I've been fascinated with them since about 2015 because I think they hold so much knowledge. I mean, obviously the authentic ones, because as you say, there are many, many experiences out there that are just clearly just someone's jumping on the bandwagon and they want 15 minutes of fame. Like, oh, I died. And they'll say, well, how did you die? Oh, I don't know how I died. But well, how do you know? You know, if you didn't have a car accident or a cardiac arrest or a drowning event, you clearly didn't die.
Yeah.
And it would be quite easy to make one up, wouldn't it? Just do a bit of research, because there does seem to be a pattern to them. You know, some are culture specific, some aren't. But for me, I've been looking into them for many, many years, and I think they're the closest thing we get to sort of any idea of what does actually happen after death. As we mentioned before, you know, you can look at holy books, different things, scriptures, and nothing actually talks about it other than, you know, you will inherit the kingdom of God or something like that. You know, there's nothing actually tangible there, is there, other than words. But these experiences, there's, as I say, there's so much to them, and it's for me, it's the information that people bring back that they couldn't know about, which is the most compelling for me. Yeah,
I would agree. And I think as well, as I was listening to Dr. Greyson, and this is as someone who's been studying this for, I don't know, I think he said coming up on 50 odd years, started in 1970s. And he said he definitely focuses. I mean, obviously he has, I think, interviewed over 1,000 people who've had or claim to have NDEs. And what he said is he definitely, when he started to become interested in this topic, he's a psychiatrist by profession, but obviously he started to become interested when he was a resident, a medical resident, and he experienced some things that he said were just scientifically unexplainable. But also what he's saying, and he categorically said there are people, as you said, that want their 15-minute fame, they want the story. And if you look through enough, you don't have to look too many, you kind of get an idea, this happened to me, and this is who I saw. And
buy my book.
Yes, buy my book. Yeah, definitely. But what I like about him, what he was saying, he definitely reverts more to the kind of earlier people that he interviewed. Because at that time, you know, you used to talk about having NDEs back in the 70s and early 80s. people viewed you very differently.
Well, you did actually risk being institutionalized as well. If you said that you'd come out of your body and seen things that you shouldn't, back in the day, you would be whacked into an institution and probably never seen again.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that, because as you said, very much now they're everywhere, I saw The Rock Johnson saying his father had an NDE. I mean, I'd only seen that today, earlier on. And I'm like, oh, it is everybody. Everyone's jumping on the bandwagon. And I suppose for me, it's just kind of, as you said, this is such an important experience that we can learn from.
Yeah.
And there is no other experience that will give us that wealth of knowledge. No. I suppose it upsets me a little bit that people are going, oh yeah, it happened to me. And I'm not saying they didn't have an experience, but I'm not sure it's a near-death experience.
Well, there's the OBE, the out-of-body experience as well, isn't there, which could be a drug-induced or medically induced, experience, which again, your consciousness does sort of leave your body, but it's not quite the same as a near-death experience. I think in the last podcast where we spoke about the soul trap, that woman that was in the bombing in the train station, and she left her body and was able to calculate how she was going to actually get out of there, but she didn't die, and she there's no experience of death. And then there's the shared near-death experience where someone will experience somebody else's near-death experience with them. I think they're quite interesting.
Sure.
And again, when I went to see our friend Yvonne,
yes,
apparently I came out of my body and I came back in. That's what she told me.
Yes.
So there's a whole bunch of different experiences around
100%.
Astral travel.
Absolutely. And some people travel most nights. Absolutely. As you said, they've got the silver cord, they go to wherever they're going to do what they need to do.
Yeah.
And then usually early hours of the morning, they reckon the veil is the thinnest between 3 and 5 or 2 and 4. Kind of people vary.
And that's interesting when most people die.
Yes,
3 o'clock in the morning.
It is. Absolutely. Absolutely.
When the veil is thinner.
Yes. Which would make sense. And similar to that experience that you had with Yvonne, she said the same, that I came out of my body, healing was done, like the divine light was, flooded through my body, and I came back down.
And did you feel like you'd been asleep just out of curiosity? Because I felt like I'd just been for a nap. Oh,
absolutely. I felt almost a little bit trance-like, like a really... calm state. Yeah.
Not that you didn't want to become a man.
No, I don't want to be a man. No. Not today, anyway. We'll come back to that at another, because actually we will come back to that when we're doing the universal laws, the law of gender. We might refocus on that a little bit.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sorry.
But interesting. When I was in that state, I felt a really sharp, I felt like a needle going into my temple.
Really?
Yes, yeah. Obviously it wasn't, nothing physically, but after I finished and I completely came out of this state, I said to Yvonne, I was like, what was that? Because I could feel like almost I leapt. She said I didn't physically move my body, but what they were doing is they were probing and they were putting through some divine light through, but
injecting it almost.
It felt like that.
Metaphysically injecting it almost.
That's exactly it.
Wow.
Yeah. So the rest of the time. Did I not tell you that?
No.
Oh, sorry. I thought I did. We do talk a lot, people, and sometimes we just forget things. So yeah, that did happen.
Wow.
But other than that, I was in such a calm state, apart from that one incident where I definitely it felt intense. But other than that, but again, those were outer body experiences, and I've never witnessed or experienced.
I think that maybe there's probably different levels to it, isn't there? So like the level that we experienced was a very moderate experience. An outer body experience where you physically traveling out your body and you're aware that you're out of body and you can actually see other things as one level, and then the near-death experience is probably where you've had a cardiac arrest. Brain activity is spiking.
Yes,
because that seems to happen at death, doesn't it? They've scientifically proven that. So there's different levels of it, I think, but I do think that is very interesting. The brain activity that the science has proven now at the moment of death, that your brain has all this extracurricular activity, What is that for?
Yeah, exactly. And interesting, again, getting back to Dr. Grayson, he was saying they've observed that there's an increase in oxygen in the body when people experience near-death experiences.
Isn't that strange? You'd think there would be a decrease, wouldn't you, if you're dying and everything's sort of shutting down?
Absolutely. And again, and I think what you'll find as we talk through this, there is no scientific, is there?
No
explanation for these. And again, we're specifically referring back to medical profession because we want to make it as scientific as we can because, as I said, there's so much out there. But again, this is a hypothesis, it's not been proven. What he's saying, that he thinks the increase in oxygen in the body helps people recall the near-death experience.
Well, there's definitely, as I say, science has proven that spike in brain activity at that moment. But where is that oxygen being derived from? Because, mind you, saying that, I will say that when I watched my great auntie pass in Scotland back in 2004, she did, just before she died, she looked up and she took a big gasp. Yeah. So is that where the extra oxygen is coming from?
Possibly. And actually, I was there when both my dad and my sister passed. Mm-hmm. And my dad was very much almost fighting for breath.
Right.
Whereas my sister, it was a lot more peaceful. Yes, there was an inhale, but not to the same extent, whereas Dad was like almost gulping for oxygen into his system. He wasn't ready to go and fought literally every step of the way. And again, we'll talk about, I think, death in probably in another podcast because he said it's so vast. So that's, and particularly, as you said, that increase in oxygen, which was interesting, and I hadn't heard that before, and I thought, well, that's new information to me.
I've not heard that aspect of it before. I knew there was a spike in brain activity, but not about the oxygen. But that is very, very, very interesting. It's like that last bit of oxygen is the thing that sort of helps you almost pass over or cross over or something, isn't it?
Potentially, yeah. And he does talk about, and again, he's saying, and I think we would agree, it's very culturally specific, isn't it, what people recall?
Yeah.
And he talks about very much Western society talk about like a tunnel of light, whereas he said he's kind of reviewed people in kind of Middle East, and they talk more about like a pipe. It's like you're going through a pipe. Yeah, because obviously maybe there's not as many tunnels.
So they wouldn't have.
So they have nothing to. So it's not a metaphor that they would utilize.
Or is that you just, even though a tunnel and a pipe, they're all cylindrical?
Absolutely.
Is that the silver cord that people talk about that you're traveling down?
Possibly. Yeah.
Because there's that theory of, I've heard this theory of the silver cord for years and years. Yeah. This is a very old sort of way of talking about it, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
yeah, absolutely. And then. And I think we are going to come back to the soul trap again and kind of dive a little bit deeper, aren't we? There's lots more. There's lots more stuff, more. And I'm wondering where. And the question about the light, and a lot of people saying actually it's when you go to the light, that's what recycles us back into this soul trap. Whereas, obviously, if it is an NDE, they're going to have to go to the light. Because
there's no other way. There's nowhere else to go, is there?
There's no way through, is there?
Well, because a lot of people with the NDE, they have this period of. So a lot of people have this period of this in this dark void, they say, but it's very comfortable, very warm. There's no fear aspect to it, but it's a dark void for a prolonged time. Yeah. And people sort of say, what's going on? Where am I? And then often they'll see a little pinprick of light, or there'll be something that comes along, and it's almost like an orientation, is it? So. Yes. To orientate you, because it seems to be either you'll come out of your body and see your body there and go, oh, there's my body, brilliant, I've died, and then there'll be the black void, and then the tunnel, and then the relatives, and then the live review, and then you're back.
Yeah.
Again, Natalie Sudman, we spoke about in the last podcast, she was out blink zone, she called it. It's like a blink, and she was out of her body into this other realm completely. So she
Sure.
bypassed the velvety blackness,
Yeah.
the tunnel. She was just in this other realm instantly with this council of beings.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think there's a variation to most endings, aren't there?
They seem to be tailored, don't they,
Yeah.
to the person, which would support, from my perspective, that it is a loving experience, because it's there's a guy called Carlton Burpo in America, and he had a near death experience when he was a child, and he said what God did, he showed me things that I liked, and this is a child speaking about it, saying he was aware that it was this figure called God, but God showed him things that he liked to make it pleasant and easy for him. Which if it was a soul trap, you'd just be yanked about and sucked into something and gone, ha ha, we got you again. We got you back again. But it seems to be a tailored, loving experience, and it makes sense to the individual that's experienced it, because there's not many people other than the ones that have the hellish experience that don't sort of say that this was something that suited their personality almost, and
I think you'll find that when you've just mentioned about when they go and there's potentially deceased loved ones, and but then I suppose depending on your religion, you may have a deity, a saint, a prophet, whatever. So I think you're right. I think it is very personalized to that individual, which would make sense, wouldn't it?
Well, of course, if it's a loving, a loving sort of caring universe, that if you got people that were coming your way, wouldn't you make it as easy as possible and as loving as possible? Because
and interesting when not so much my sister, but definitely my dad, he was observing his mum, who had passed previously, in the lead up, and it was a conversation I had with the nurse, and what the nurses, obviously specifically trained palliative nurses, which I think, by the way, they do an amazing job. I think end of life care is just how people do that, and the dedicated nurses I think are amazing. But what she was saying is that's what a lot of the time they will see loved ones coming to guide them through that transition.
Oh, so they're actually on board with that?
Yeah.
Because I've heard a lot of palliative care nurses say, no, you shouldn't sort of go with these they say it's just an hallucination and you shouldn't go with it. And that's really cruel. You should go with it if that's...
Yeah, but
you should go with it.
And I mean, I spoke to a few, obviously it's not a general consensus, but they were saying absolutely. Because what they said, if you allow them to feel at peace, they're going to pass more peacefully, Absolutely. And you go like, your mum's here, your brother's here, they're all here to kind of help you transition over. That for me feels very loving.
It's very loving, isn't it? And that would make sense because, you've got 1 foot here and you've got 1 foot there. So you're not going to see them, all the time. And these cases of, deceased loved ones coming to visit are documented throughout.
Yes. Yes.
There's a lady on YouTube who's a hospice nurse, and she documents all these things and tells stories of things that have happened, and she's absolutely convinced that this is real, and because she sees it every day.
Yeah.
She's with people that are dying every day, and she experiences what they go through.
Yeah.
And there's absolute data there to support that.
And I see the change in how people now support those passing over. I mean, again, it's a slightly different comparison. My dad passed in hospital. My sister passed in a hospice.
Mm-hmm.
And this sounds ridiculous, but it was the most beautiful passing that I've ever witnessed.
Your sister's?
Yes. Yeah. It was, the room, we had music on. There was incense burning. There, we were all there as a family, in and out. Chatting, laughing, talking. And it was just the way they set it up. It was just really, really beautiful.
As it should be.
It should be. Absolutely. Exactly. Because obviously the hearing is the last to go, they say, isn't it? But to know that she was surrounded by everyone who loved her, and it was everyone, there was laughter in the room, and you were chatting. And I suppose for me in that situation, I would like to hear those voices and know that I was surrounded by people who loved me. And I think that would make for an easier transition.
Because there'll be less fear, wouldn't there? There'd be less fear, and people there, accepting what's going on, and and acknowledging it on a mass scale. So yeah, that's wonderful. I think they do that in some care homes. I think they call it namaste, where they'll do sort of that sort of incense thing, and just really create a real low stimulus, peaceful environment.
Yeah, it was really
that's the best way to do it.
Absolutely, yeah. But obviously, for those people that have the near death and kind of what they come back and say, as you said, I think it is very loving, or the vast majority is loving. And Dr. Grayson talked about, sometimes this drug-induced NDEs, he questions it because he said, from his perspective, it's a kind of almost a different phenomenon, is what he's saying.
In what way did he say it's different?
He didn't really go into it. He was saying more around they don't have the same features.
Yes.
And it is very, obviously within reason, but what he's saying, there's a kind of a core element of features that somebody will experience during this NDE. And some of the things that he focuses on, it started out, I think, 50 plus features, and he said it's constantly been refined and kind of whittled down. And he'd done this with groups of researchers and people who had experienced NDEs. So for me, it feels like it's a good combination of those who've experienced it, but with those who's also studied it for years. And he kind of broke it down into kind of 4 main categories with 4 elements in each, which makes up the 16. So initially he talks about kind of the cognition, so kind of time speeding up. That would be some like an indication it's an NDE, or it'll be like your thoughts are quite rapid.
Okay.
And then there's things he talks about very much your thoughts becoming very vivid, very intense, a lot around sensations as well, he kind of mentioned, and things like kind of feeling that you're on another realm, or I think he described it as like it's an unearthly world, I think is the term he uses. That's something that they experience. And then he kind of talks more about the kind of the paranormal elements attached to it. So can you see future, scenes from the future?
Which some people do.
Absolutely. And then he said, but it's very much you're separate from your body. You can see your physical body, but you're very much separate from that. It is more vibrational rather than you being in your physical body. So they're kind of some of the elements that he talks about. And he said the vast majority who have these experiences they won't have every single feature, but they'll have quite a lot of those features. And again, he said it comes into it, again, culturally specific, but, some sort of religious deities saying some, potentially appear as well as loved ones.
Yeah. Well, I think, what was I going to say? One common thing that people do seem to say, one commonality is that this isn't real.
Oh, 100%.
This is not real.
Yeah.
That they experienced is the reality, and this is more like some kind of dream. And that's quite hard to get your head around from this vantage point, isn't it?
Sure.
Because it seems so real.
Yes, it
seems
is
so real, but everybody says that is what's real.
And that's interesting because this is one of the things he said he finds the hardest to accept. He said there is no linear time.
They all say that, don't they?
And he said, as a scientist, he said it's really hard for him to get his head around.
Yeah.
But and that is, again, one of the things. So time speeds up, or it kind of, he said, people can see the past, present, and future kind of simultaneously as well. So he said there's all of that confusion around time and how long you're gone and all the rest of it. He said, because so much can happen in a short space of time.
A lot of the people say that it felt like they were there for years and years on this other side. And that's, crazy to think about, isn't it? It's a really interesting concept. And another interesting concept is the information that people bring back with them. They know things that they can't possibly know. There's one there's one doctor whose patient had a cardiac arrest, and she came to him after she'd come out of the operation. She said, "I saw your office and your monitor, your computer monitor, with all these post-it notes, one post-it note attached to another post-it note, and so on and so forth." And the doctor was like, "That's calls that I'd had whilst I was in surgery to call this person, call that person, call the other person." He goes, and the nurse would stick one post-it to the other, and he goes, "There's no way this person could have known that because they were out of it.
Yeah.
They were, under anesthesia, and they never, when they in recovery, they never went into the office. So there's no way they could have seen that." Another lady went up towards the ceiling, and she could see, I think it was a revolving fan, and there was like a red sticker on it. And she said, "If you go up and look at the fan, there's a red sticker." And they were like, "Don't be silly. It was a medication." And they went up, and there was a red sticker. And there's another report of a woman sitting on a hospital floor somewhere outside with the birds on a ledge, and there's a shoe or something on the ledge, and they went up and there was a shoe on that ledge on that particular place. So there's things that people bring back that they can't possibly know. How do you explain that? There's nothing that can explain that. So for me, that is, these things are absolutely real.
Oh, 100%.
And completely compelling, completely compelling.
Yeah. And you do hear a lot of that. And again, it was one of the key ones that really got Dr. Grayson involved in it is he interviewed this man and who had a near-death experience, and he said the consultant who he had not met, the chief consultant he hadn't met prior to going into surgery, and he said he was doing the chicken dance, right? And he described like he's doing this, and Dr. Grayson was like, "No, that would not have happened in theatre." Yeah, the chief consultant probably wasn't doing the chicken dance, so this guy is adamant, and he's like, "I'm telling you, this is what he was doing. He was doing this weird chicken dance in the surgery." So he said, please go speak to him and see what he says. So Dr. Grayson said, "Okay, all right," and go speak to him. So he went and spoke to the consultant, and the consultant said that he likes his residents to do a lot of kind of the setting up and kind of just observing them. And he said that, because obviously as a resident, it's all about learning, isn't it? And practicing under supervision. And he said that because he was sterile, what he was doing, he was pointing things out with his elbows. So that was hence the chicken. And that was he said, one of the kind of key stories that, an experience that got him more involved and more interested.
Got him hooked.
Kind of pretty much,
got
yes.
Him hooked.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think all of them, and I think this is where, when we started off about the number of people who are now saying they've had near-death experience, I find the ones who talk about it being quite dramatic or quite tragic, I find that a little bit more difficult for me to accept, because I think when you look again at the NDE, the scale that's out there, they all talk about, this beautiful bright light, kind of feeling very like unconditional love, and feeling almost at peace, or feeling in union or in harmony with the universe.
Yeah.
So that again, that is part, of the scale. So when people talk about had this like hellish NDE, I find that harder to accept.
Yeah, and they're not as common, are they? The hellish ones are not as common, but I have seen some that were quite compelling as well. And these people don't seem to have any reason to, make these stories up. I mean, there's some that are clearly Christian propaganda.
Yes, I agree.
To be like, "Oh, I saw all the homosexuals and I saw all the fornicators all burning in hell."
Sure.
And it's like, right, okay.
Sure,
all right, then that fits very well with your book.
Yes.
But some people that have had a hellish one, a guy got shot, and he'd been shot by, it was like an armed robbery. But again, his NDE could have been the result of, where his consciousness was, and, being shot is not the nicest thing, is it? It's, it's a very traumatic experience, and he could have, his brain could have sort of guided him that way. But, I will say, even though the hellish ones, well, a common one for the hellish ones is they call out the name of Jesus, and the hand comes down and pulls them out of it. Sure. So they always come out of it. They don't ever stay in this hellish realm. It's a hellish realm for a while.
Yes.
And then they get pulled out into the light, and then they come back.
Sure.
No one goes to this hellish realm and then
you're
back.
scooched back in. Yeah,
there's
a
hell, but then there's the loving side as well. So that's very interesting, because there's always the happy ending to the NDE.
Sure.
Either way, you know. So again, loving.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And again, I suppose it's kind of what we talked about in the Soul Trap. I think where you're at in that time
will dictate.
Will dictate your experience.
Yeah.
I think, you know, what we've talked about in the last ones, even around, you know, depending on where you are, you know, with your chakra, if you're in your survival root chakra, your experiences are very, very different.
Very, very.
And I think that for me, because of that commonality with NDEs, both children, adults, you know, from vast cultures around the world, there's a slight variation, but they're all saying pretty much the same.
They are. And then there's that demographic of people that come back and they've got either musical ability, they can just like play a piano, or they can speak another language, or they've got psychic ability.
Yeah.
You know, there does seem to be some correlation between touching this light and coming back with either a renewed sense of perspective and self, or some kind of spiritual, musical, some kind of gift that you come back with.
Absolutely. And those that come back and are healed.
And in the instant healing, Anita Moorjani, you know.
Absolutely. Amazing book. I loved it.
Was it the cancer? The
lymph, was, the lymph nodes dying to be cancerous. Me. Yeah.
And although there's some people that say that none of that information is verified, you know, with the hospital documents.
Oh, interesting.
Again, but you know, there's.
Yeah. But
you don't know, but some
whether
it
is
heal.
Or it isn't, I think her perspective was different when she came back.
Yeah.
She'd gone from being someone who was a complete people pleaser, doing everything for everyone else, really not focusing on her own well-being or her mental state. Yeah. This happens and she completely changes, and some, you know, she is cured from cancer for a period of time.
And that is common, because you often hear about people coming back from these near-death experiences, and they'll either leave a relationship, or they'll change the job, or they don't want to do what they did before, because they've had this experience of something that most people will never get an experience of until they, you know, pass themselves, and it just changes you. And it's like, I can't live my life in the same way with this knowledge as I was living before. And I think that's just like, that's just outstanding. I think it's just fantastic.
And for me, there's something bigger than us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know some people don't like it. I get a real sense of unity, and you know, that the fact that there's so much more out there that we don't know, and that we are connected to as well.
Absolutely.
So for me, there's a real sense of unity, whereas some people find it quite a separation from that, you know. But.
Yeah, but I don't know. A lot of the NDEs, they often say, you know what I mean. You sort of one with everything, and you know, you become You've only got to think of a question, and the answer's there straight away.
It's that all-knowing, isn't it?
That all-knowing. Well, you're part of the all that is, I guess. You know, you become part of that, and that would make sense because you don't have the physical body which separates you.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a physical matter, isn't it, that separates you from the all that isness.
And I think we touched on it a little bit in the last one about, you know, our brains can't comprehend so much. So I think when people come back, they come back with some knowledge, but they don't know everything, because I don't think we could comprehend everything.
And they also say on the other side, they gained all this knowledge, but they weren't allowed to bring it back.
Yeah. Of course.
Because we're not meant to know everything here.
No.
Because if we were meant to know everything here, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, this is part of life, isn't it? It's the sort of magic of figuring it out yourself, or you know it after you leave the body. Because if you know too much.
Yeah,
you know too much, and it's like getting the answers to the test.
Sure.
Before you've taken.
It just doesn't feel fair and right, does it?
Not that it's a test. Not that I think it's a test, but it's that sort of analogy of you know, knowing the answers before. You know, it's cheating a bit, isn't it?
Sure.
You know.
So, what do you think about these people that are doing drug-induced NDEs?
Well, there's the DMT thing, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Where people go into this realm where they see these little gnomes.
Yes.
That apparently are the cogs of the universe and all that. And I just think it's dangerous. I just think it's, I think there's a lot of dodgy realms out there that you could access. And I think that's part of that because they don't bring back any positive information.
No.
It's just an observation of something a bit strange and a bit weird. And whereas the near-death experiences, they bring back such loving and healing information. I mean, one of my friends, his friend died and he was having real trouble just accepting it.
Okay.
And there's this guy on YouTube that's created a compilation of near-death experiences. And it's called The Commonalities of the Near-Death Experience. And I recommend you watch it because it's really good. It's about an hour long. And Phil watched it and he goes, I'm at peace. Yeah. From watching these real life people have these experiences because he was really grappling with his friend dying and it really affected him. And he just says, that gave me peace. I was like, job done.
Yeah. And I get that. Mm-hmm. There's a peacefulness around the fact that, we are part of a bigger universe, aren't we? And that it is loving.
It is. Whereas the drug-induced ones are more confusing, I think, and they bring you back with a lot more sort of questions.
Yeah.
And will probably make you, if you pondered that too much, you could probably drive yourself a little bit mad because...
Yeah,
I think
I was listening to this woman who had an NDE. It was an overdose. Mm-hmm. It wasn't drug induced, it was an overdose. And she said that, and at the time she said her life was chaotic. She was party central. She was working, but life was just one big party. And she'd overdosed one night, and for her, she saw Jesus, and she said it was very peaceful. And she came back and she said she tried to kind of alter her life, but it didn't really last very long. She was trying to, clean up her act. And then she was in a bar one night and she started talking to this person. And after that, she induced another NDE through, I think it was ketamine, I think she used at the time. Mm. And it was just really interesting that you've had one near-death experience, you've gained some knowledge, you haven't implemented, so now you're going to do a drug-induced one. I found that really, really difficult. Mm. And actually, what more do you want?
Exactly. You've been given a touch of the afterlife and you've been given like insights that most people don't get, and that's still not enough, but that just goes down to, I guess, your personality, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Again, with the suicide NDEs, they're never as pleasant as a car accident or a natural health issue where someone just dies naturally through natural causes. The suicide ones do tend to be the more of the hellish ones, don't they?
Yeah, they do, absolutely. So I think for me, I think we started, and I would still agree with what you're saying. I think people that have come back from NDEs, the authentic ones that we think or we assume are authentic, I think we can get a lot from it.
Absolutely.
I think
they're like the oracle.
They are, absolutely. And to know that, we are loved and that we, there is something bigger, higher than us, mm-hmm. and that we are protected and we're guided. And as you said, some people that come back with all of these additional gifts, whether they be psychic gifts, creative gifts, I think it's, or self-healing. Mm-hmm. I think it's pretty incredible. So I think for me, it's about using my discernment to only focus on those NDE stories that resonate with me.
Definitely. And I think ultimately it teaches you that there is a light and there's things that you can do to connect to the light, or there's things you can do to disconnect to the light. Yeah. So the choice is yours, ultimately, whatever you want to do. I choose to connect to the light. How about you?
Absolutely. And also, I think from reading more about the NDE scale, I think I'll probably utilize that as my decision maker.
Yes. Yeah.
When, I mean, I know there's 16, they might not have all of them, but when I am listening to kind of people talk about it, I think I'll probably have a wee checklist in my head, because that just works for me. It feels
it's logical, isn't it?
It does, and more genuine. Logical. It is, yeah, yeah. So I think that will help for me.
Yes, kind of especially in the super of information, disinformation, all sorts of stuff going around.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't know about you, but it feels like it's quadrupled the amount of NDEs now, isn't it?
And also other sort of topics and metaphysical concepts that there's all sorts out there now. The stuff I've never even heard of. I mean. Again, the chakra removal that we spoke about, the soul trap, all the Gnostic stuff that, it's like, whoa.
I know. It is a bit of a head spin, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Keep it simple, guys. Keep it simple. I think that's the key.
Yeah, it is. It's about, discernment, keeping it simple.
And
go within.
And
Does it feel right? If it feels right, well, that's all we need to focus on. Yeah. Because as you said, it can get very confusing.
It can get very confusing and very overwhelming. The amount of information that you can take in can just send you into just a mental headspin.
Yeah. Okay, I think
we've had a juicy conversation there.
I think we have, and we hope that you got something from that. And as you said, there is lots of information out there. Also, I suppose for me, I like the more scientific element of it. So maybe Dr. Bruce Greyson is incredible. And as you said, it's all scientifically based, which is good. It kind of thing that for me, it helps me discern. So we hope you found it interesting. We hope you gained some knowledge around NDEs and what kind of to look out for if people are wanting to look into it a little bit more.
And if you've had an NDE or an out-of-body experience or anything similar to that, please let us know in the comments. And it'd be great to hear your experience, or send us an email or something. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time for more juicy tidbits. Ciao for now.
Bye.